granniopteryx. She knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello, I got some interesting answers to my video about Nigel Farage, comparing him with the character Flashman in the MacDonald, Fraser and Hughes novels. And some of them were very interesting, and I thought, well, it might be worthwhile actually addressing some of them. So I'm going to go through one or two, by no means all, there were quite a few of them. So we had people who really thought that I'd hit the nail on the head there. Brilliant insight again, thank you very much. And then I got stuff like this. Do voters really like Farage? His popularity, in scare quotes, always seems rigged, as he is a rather repellent character. But there's no elaboration on that. And beyond saying that he's rather repellent, this isn't really an answer. Now, the fact that he might be a politician and capable of the sort of machinations that a good politician should be, he may be somewhat even Machiavellian. But that doesn't mean he's going to be a bad leader. I mean, I got fooled by that hail fellow, well met, I'm terribly well educated persona of Boris Johnson. I thought he was going to be the answer. If you look back to my reaction to the exit polls after the 2019 election, whatever it was, I was sitting there in my pyjamas, practically dancing around with glee in my chair. And yeah, what a disaster that was. Of course, it was better than Labour, but not appreciably so. He just had more interesting hair. A rather repellent character. I'm not interested in whether I'd like to, share a flat with him. I'm interested in whether he can actually organise things so that the rent gets paid. I hope Farage doesn't chicken out at the last moment. And that is a serious worry, of course, because he is a politician. People saying it shows how desperate the left are, and that's true, they are desperate. And then there's this one here, which is a particular one that induced me to make this video in the first place. Many voters don't like Farage. Well, yes, I mean, that would be true of any politician, even the most saintly. And then he says, most realise. So we've gone from many to most. You should pay attention to that, because this is somebody who, he may be right. I'm not saying he's wrong. What I'm saying is that from his point of view, looking at the way he is approaching Nigel Farage, I am recording, the way he's approaching Nigel Farage, this is not a matter of fact, it's a matter of how he is constructing the picture in his mind. He says many voters don't like Farage, and then he says most realise. So he's gone from many to most. Do you see the trick? He's played on himself. He didn't say most voters don't like Farage. They realise he's weak, disingenuous, all the rest of it. He's got to step up the wordage. I know it's not a word, but I couldn't think of anything else at the time. Okay, many voters don't like Farage, and that, of course, is letting you know that there's a little problem with the way this person thinks. I'm not saying that they are mentally deficient. I'm saying that whoever this person is, he's a supporter of Advance UK, a political organisation which I respect, by the way. But this person is trying to do some self-convincing, which is never a good sign. Most realise he's a weak, disingenuous slimeball. Well, that is a personal justification, a personal assessment. So far, what we've got from Nigel Farage, whatever he is, he's not weak. He has endured years of the sort of calumny and jibing of everybody in the, what do you call it, the bien-pensant, the people who are running from, I saw him right at the beginning of his, well, more or less at the beginning of his political career when he was on Have I Got News for You? And the poor fellow, you could see he didn't know how to handle the sort of cut and thrust of what Ian Thingy and that other guy, comedian, who I liked as a comedian, were throwing at him all the time. I'll remember his name in a minute. I was always bad with names. When I was about 14, I met this nice lady in a shop. She greeted me, asked me about my parents. She obviously knew a lot about me, and being young and sort of honest, I said, I'm terribly sorry. I do know your face, but I can't remember who you are. She was my aunt. Right. Okay. I shall digress here. Apparently, the famous conductor John Barbie Raleigh, obviously a great brain. When you're a conductor, you have to remember an awful lot of music and an awful lot of musicians as well. And he met this nice lady in Harrods, somewhere like that. And oh, Mr. Barbie Raleigh, how are you? And he answered her, and he couldn't remember who she was. He knew he'd seen her before. And finally, he summoned up the courage to say, yeah, and how's your husband? And she smiled at him and said, oh, he's fine, still king. Anyway. Right, well, back to Nigel Farage. So here we have this many and most chap. Weak, disingenuous, slimeball. Slimeball is not an answer. Weak, you may regard him as weak. He does change his political stances from time to time, I know that. But weak, no, he is not weak. He may be an opportunist. I think you can quite justifiably call him an opportunist. That doesn't stop him from being a good politician, though. Disingenuous? I don't think he is. He's fairly honest about whatever policy he has at the time. And slimeball, that's just one of those insults of the same thing as Hitler and that sort of thing that's levelled at him. So this argument goes from reasonable through moderately not making much sense to absolute disqualification, really. He's capitalising on the fact Labour are dire and the Conservatives not much better. Well, yeah, but that's what any politician should be doing right now. So that's hardly a disqualification. Reform will slide down the polls now there's a proper alternative. Yeah, well, maybe they would. My big fear is that, for instance, in some places, Advance UK will go head to head with Reform in the next elections and Labour will get in because they'll just divide the vote. There really has to be some cooperation between the Conservatives, Advance UK and Reform. I do think that. I think Reform has the most organisation, it's got the most big guns, and it has the most voter recognition. Yeah, market recognition. So that will, if the Labour Party doesn't actually cancel all the elections, which is something I'm also worried about, they will be in next. What they have to do is divide stuff up with the Conservatives and Advance UK so that they're not kicking each other in the shins. All right, well, that's this guy. Look, whatever you do, if you're making an argument, at least to me, I mean, this might work on the left, slimeball. That makes everything perfectly clear. But if you're arguing with me, I'm afraid slimeball isn't a word you can use as a qualification for not or for being a politician. That's just your personal opinion. I can call somebody a slimeball. In fact, I'm going to call this chap here a slimeball, but I'll get to him in a minute. All right. Guardian smear campaign. It's not just the Guardian, it's everyone on the left. And this one, when the opposition feels that their only way to attack is through cheap jibes, and let you see what we've got this again, cheap jibes. I'd say disingenuous slimeball. That's a cheap jibe. Then it's obvious they have no imagination or principle. Yeah, they don't have no creativity. That's the big thing. They think along sort of railway line type thinking, and since the philosophy du jour is that Farage is Hitler, well, that's the way they're going to think, and they believe it. You see, because it's like it's sort of like a politics of Lego. You know, you just slot in the pieces that fit, but they're just pieces. So if you look at a sculpture of Nigel Farage in Lego, it's going to be very, pixelated, isn't it? Well, that's the way a lefty appears to do his or her thinking. Well said, thank you. Vote reform, you know, it makes sense, you see. I never thought I'd hear somebody defend Flashman. And then I say, but am I correct? And then this guy has responded to me. Yes, Harry Flashman was an outstanding cad. That's absolutely true. And a grubby teenage boy's dream. Yeah, everything that a teenage boy wanted to be. You know, powerful, rude, above everything, and a bad boy. And people love a rogue. They love a rogue. Now, whatever Flashman in the Tom Brown School Days incarnation turned out to be, he was something of a hero. Some other people. Now, I'm not saying he's a nice person. I'm not saying I'd like to have been a friend of his. Well, you couldn't possibly be a friend of his. You'd be a sort of acolyte or a neighbour or even his mother. But, as a figure, he was a contrarian. I suppose his self-awareness was his only redeeming feature. Now, you were not George MacDonald Fraser's target audience. At that time, you should have been reading Bodice Rippers. How did you come to read these books? And did you ever read Mr. American? No, I've never heard of Mr. American, but I'll check that out, this person who's writing to me. But I was never... Well, yeah, I did read Bodice Rippers, actually. I used to read Forever Amber, the Amber stories, and the ones by Georgette Heyer. I used to enjoy those as well, but I also read, I was a voracious reader, science fiction. I'm particularly knowledgeable, I think, about science fiction, at least the old school science fiction. And I very much enjoyed the Fraser, but they were just historical fiction. They were extremely well researched, weren't they? And what George MacDonald Fraser did was he honestly reflected the way people looked at the world in the 19th century. It was a little bit toned down for 20th century audiences, but he did reflect that. And that, I used to say to my students when I was teaching at university, read historical fiction. It's the nearest thing to time travel you're ever going to get. And when you read these books, you are looking into the minds of people who lived at that time. And that is really important. Oh, hang on. What was the other one? Barbara Cartland. I read those too. Yeah, I did read Bodice Ribbon. But you could get through those in an evening, couldn't you? I suppose I was quite a fast reader as well. And yeah, you know, they were fine. It's like a Barbara Cartland novel is like a meringue for dessert. So you might read, say, Treasure Island or something like that. And you know, that's a meaty sort of book. And then you read a Georgette Heyer, and that's like sort of, you know, a little bit of nonsense at the end of a meal, a meringue or a trifle. I mean, that's the exact meaning of the word trifle. It means a nonsense, a little sweet nonsense. Okay, well, yeah, there's your literature lesson for the day. It's clear that the heightened rhetoric in the USA was supposed to end with Trump dead. The plan didn't quite work out. Let's hope your election doesn't turn out that way. Yeah, and I do fear for Nigel Farage. And that's why I know he's not weak. A lot of people were just... he did withdraw from the political process at one point. And then he came back and he knew what he was going into. And there are so many Labour politicians who just retired from Labour politics because they couldn't take that sort of... It's not just the actual threats. It's the scorn of your contemporaries that takes the most withstanding. And it requires a great deal of personal strength, confidence in yourself to do that. Look at the treatment. Yeah, how long will offered last? Yeah, so what this person is saying is that Farage is a bit of a dictator and can't take anyone who can stand next to him. And that may be true. But you tell me what Prime Minister hasn't been somewhat like that. And this person says, yes, so what should we do? Who should we vote for? And this person says, be patient, see how things turn out. Look, if there were an election tomorrow, I would be voting Reform. That's what I would be doing, because I can't forgive I certainly can't forgive the Labour Party for destroying this country, and I can't forgive the Conservatives. I mean, I might, if I were living in Kemi Badenoch's constituency or David Davis's constituency or one or two others, Rees-Mogg, although he doesn't have one right now, but you get the idea. I would be voting for them because they are thoroughly solid people. But mostly I have this abiding anger with the Conservative Party for what they did to Liz Truss. I think Liz Truss was right. And they all ganged up on her. If they'd have supported her, I didn't have a lot of respect for her, but in comparison with the other people around her. Anyway, yeah, I'm off on a tangent again. Demi, you usually present as one of the diligent types who actually reads the bloody memo before mouthing off. So I must ask, did you bother to read the accounts of Farage's revolting antics against the Jewish pupils concerned? Yes, I did. First of all, it's the sort of thing teenage boys do, and they do it because they feel this would have got them some sort of a following. But I did notice he never actually resorted to any physical violence. He didn't try beating anyone up in the playground or anything like that. And yes, it wasn't nice, it wasn't right, but he is not talking that stuff now. And that is the important thing. It wasn't school. Yes, it was. It was probably over the line, but it was still schoolboy japes. And I'm speaking as someone, I have to tell you, I was bullied at school as well, mostly because I was a bit brighter than most of my schoolmates, I think. I mean, looking back on it. So I'd make points which would offend them. So, you're going to get somebody who's a bit different. And they're going to get bullied. Now, I couldn't find it, but I did see a reference to another Jewish pupil at the same school who said that Farage didn't go for him in any way. So there were obviously some Jewish boys he did go for, and he went for them because he knew that was a weak point. And what those Jewish boys should have done was got together and I'm not going to say that. That could get me thrown off YouTube. Okay, he tried to wash it away as mere commonplace behaviour. Absolute rot. It wasn't. It was very commonplace. There was so much anti-Semitism at the school I went to. Everybody took it for granted. It was an exercise in pure cold-blooded anti-Semitic nastiness, dressed up as entitled playground fun. Well, here, it wasn't, it was dressed up as playground fun. No, it wasn't even, but that entitled tells me a bit about Polygon Native. No, entitled is the wrong word there. It's just exposed your snobism, Polygon. Yeah, it was nastiness. I do not believe that being nasty is a disqualification from being a prime minister. In fact, I'd suggest it was probably a primary requirement. When you get too nice, you do things wrong. Do you remember, talking about science fiction, do you remember that Star Trek episode where Kirk got divided into two, a good side and a bad side? The bad side turned up drunk. Was it in Uhura's cabin? Not a nice person at all. And the good side, he was a very nice person, and when faced with a difficult choice, couldn't make his mind up. There has to be some nastiness in a good leader, I'm afraid. What Graham Greene, another writer I read quite a lot of, he referred to as that chip of ice in the soul of a writer, of an author. You have to have that chip of ice, he said. I'll simply respectfully suggest you shouldn't let the man's faux man of the people shtick fool you. The venom was there from the start. I'm not so sure it was venom. I do know it was bullying. I don't think it's the sort of thing he's pushing too much of now. Building himself up by othering and taunting Jews. Yeah, that's true. He certainly was doing that. He was using the Jews as a means of gathering a group around him. Some boys do that and some boys don't. And yeah, I know girls do it the same. I know that because I was at the unpleasant end of this sort of thing. Maybe that's why I make YouTube videos now. If I met any of those girls again, I would not and one of them turned out to be in some position of authority, I would look at what they're doing with their authority now. As a matter of fact, I did meet one of my bullies. She was a nurse. She'd become a nurse. She was doing a good job as far as I could tell. And then here, I wonder when the lib turds are going to notice that Nigel's issue are NF. Yeah, well, give them time. They're not that bright, it takes a while to filter through. So this guy here says he should shake hands with Tommy. Yeah, I understand why he's not doing it, but I think he could. He is so often, on the BBC, he's referred to routinely, isn't he, in the news as the far-right party of Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, the far-right leader of Reform Party, that sort of thing. I think he just doesn't want to give them a little more fuel for their fire. Throwing cheap, unsubstantiating insults at anyone is not only a hallmark of the cowardly bully, it also signifies defeat. Well, I don't know, a lot of people use it, but let's see. Do you remember that one of the first I read to you about slime ball? Well, maybe you who wrote that might learn from this. A lot of people see through that. I'm not fooled by him. He's saying what he knows people want to hear. Yeah, for sure. But only to get into power. Once in, he'll turn like a corkscrew. Now, I don't know. What do you mean? He's going to be a socialist? He's going to become a communist? What do you mean, turn like a corkscrew? He might cave to the Muslim vote. I would advise him not to do that because it's not a reliable vote. I'm just hoping he won't. But we know that the Conservative and the Labour do. So, again, to quote another answer, what choice would we have? I'm just flicking through here. Rick Mayall? Oh, Flash Heart character, I see. Yes, of course. But that was in the Blackadder thing, wasn't it? You see, this guy said, Rick Mayall, and I said, why? And then he reminded me that Rick Mayall played a very flamboyant Elizabethan explorer called Flash Heart. Yes. But that was a very one-dimensional character. The point about Flashman is he isn't one-dimensional. A very well-drawn character. Yeah, my positive view of Farage is hugely multiplied by my total and utter dislike, no hatred of Starmer and co. Yeah, and Farage is definitely capitalising on that. OK, now, when we're talking about bullying, just before I finish, because this is going on long enough, I just want to look at the insincere smile of this fellow, Richard Burgon, MP, who has received an award from some Muslim organisation, which he's holding up proudly, and reminded me of that quote from A Man for All Seasons, where Sir Thomas More finds Richard Rich there with a chain of office around him. He says, oh, that's nice. Where did you get that? Yeah, I am now Lord Protector or Lord Governor of Wales or something. And Sir Thomas More says, oh, then he quotes the Bible, Richard, what profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? And then he continues, but for Wales. And Richard Burgon, looking insincerely proud of himself, he got this, from Labour Muslims Network. So there's a network there. They gave him this wonderful thing that he got for selling his soul. And why I'm saying he sold his soul, including my work in pushing for sanctions in Israel over its genocide. So there is no genocide. Israel is pursuing a war. You can criticise how it's doing that, but you cannot call it genocide. Well, you can if you're a Muslim or a Muslim ally, because the truth does seem, especially around here, to be rather sort of distant to a lot of Muslims' view of the world. Ayub Khan, an MP, a proudly Muslim MP and a very educated man with a lovely English accent, was talking about the banning of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from Birmingham on the grounds that in Amsterdam they were throwing Muslims into the river, which is an exact inversion of the truth. And he must have known that. Muslims threw a Maccabi fan into the river. I think that happened only once, but it was the Muslims who did it. And certainly Muslim taxi drivers and some of the receptionists at the hotels where the Maccabi fans were staying were actually coordinating with each other over WhatsApp on what they referred to as a Jew hunt. And Ayub Khan was saying that the Jews were pursuing a Muslim hunt. He had actually inverted the truth there. And he's not being picked up that much. A few people, you know, speakers in the Spectator, for instance, or Spike, they'll mention it. Where's the outrage? An MP, where's the outrage? You know, that's bullying. And he's talking about the hatred being whipped up against the Muslim community that's increasingly leading to appalling abuse and physical attacks. He sold his soul for that glass thing there, not even Wales. All right, but that's bullying. And these people are lauded in the press, not as bullies. So when somebody goes back to Nigel Farage's childhood times, I have to say, you know, that guy who says you present yourself as somebody who does the research before mouthing off wherever it was. I don't regard that anywhere near as close as what's going on here. Okay, well, I can't find that thing anymore, but it doesn't matter. You probably remember it. All right, that's it. That's my report on the comments after my last video. Till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.